Welcome back. On this episode of Proclaim, we have some pretty cool stuff. We're going to share our marriage testimony.
Proclaim the glory of the Lord.
This is the first time that we've had two people come and share on the channel, and excitingly, it is going to be my wife to do the first one, and this is going to be the opening to our relationship series, which we've already started, and if you haven't watched the intro to that, I highly recommend that you go back and check it out. But we wanted to share our testimony as a way to hopefully encourage you, inspire you. Not saying that every testimony of marriage needs to happen this way, but I think it's really important that we share this, because hopefully what you see in our testimony is not Jane and I, but that you see God working in us. Because for so many, especially for me, I grew up watching certain movies and television shows, and so I had kind of this image in my mind of what love was supposed to be and how it was supposed to work and how it's supposed to come together. And that is not what happened at all with our marriage. In fact, when I spent some time away from the Lord, I participated in things that I wish I hadn't. And so when I had my testimony and I started to develop my relationship with Christ, I decided I would put him first above all else. And so I was single for a very long time, for probably like 7 or 8 years. And I was willing, even though it was a little grudgingly, that if God wanted me to remain single, that I would. So that I could show others that you can be happy and you can have a purpose-filled life, and you don't necessarily have to be married to do so. But it was still something that was always on my heart. So I'm going to share a little bit of mine. We're going to go back and forth and kind of share how this amazing story unfolded. Jane and I actually met probably, I want to say around 2013 or 2012. She happened to come into a Sunday school class that I was teaching, and Jane came in and she immediately declared her opinion, very strongly, very boldly, and I had never met her before. And so that was kind of the first interaction that we had. And at that time, there was no feelings or thoughts of something potentially more.
So when I first went to outreach, my mom was going already, and she had already met Andrew. And she said, I really want you to meet this guy. I think you're really going to like him. I think you guys would make a good couple. And I said immediately, no. I'm not interested. I don't want anything to do with Andrew. And that was my
yeah, that's a good point.
Thought process going into meeting him. When I did meet him, I really respected your classes, your sermons. I felt like a lot of ministry out of what you had to share anytime you spoke.
So. Stop it. So in 2015, she invited my dad and I, or actually I think we asked if we could come in and do a priesthood visit. And the visit went really well. And she asked us to come back a couple weeks later. And she shared some burdens that she was carrying that were weighing her down, very heavy. And it was in the course of this visit, and this is totally unexpected. I didn't have any feelings up to this point, and it wasn't even on my mind, but yet God spoke to me during this visit so strongly. It wasn't an audible voice, but the Spirit was so powerful. It was like these words were etched in my heart and in my mind. And this is what God said. He said, "This, Jane, is your companion. I am preparing her for you, and I'm preparing you for her." And as soon as I was feeling this Spirit and I was hearing these words, I was so excited. I'm like, yeah, this is great. I finally have this testimony. And then came the words, "But you will have to wait." And I didn't want to hear that. But I tried to abide by it as much as I could. And so slowly we started to get to know one another. We started spending time doing things, going on visits together, doing studies together. And eventually I kind of got the courage, I guess, to somewhat sort of ask her out. I mean, it was not super blatant, I thought.
After you approached me and said that you would like to start intentionally dating, I said, I will pray about it.
That's a good way of saying
which is the
no.
Christian girl answer. I don't really want to.
Keep that in your mind next time someone asks you out.
Let me pray about this. But I did pray about it that week, and I felt like the Lord was telling me that I should start dating Andrew. And so I knew during the course of the weekend we wouldn't have any time alone. We were going to be in the car with a bunch of other people. We were going to be interacting with a bunch of other people. So on my way home from work that night, I wrote out a little note, and then I handed it to him. And I think you thought it was a breakup note or something. Like,
I wasn't sure what it was, but I did. I actually still have that letter.
yeah.
But she said yes. And so that was in 2017. So 2 years after I had that testimony, in the spring of 2017, when we were going down to Tennessee to do a preaching series down there, we decided we would start dating. And I felt that it was really, really important that I do not share my testimony with her, because I didn't want to put that kind of pressure on her. I wanted her to be able to come into it on her own if that was her desire.
Okay, so we started dating in the spring, over the summer, maybe middle of the summer. Andrew was preaching at Odessa. Yeah, Odessa. And it was going to be the afternoon service. So we were going to go for the morning service. He said there would be a potluck, and then he would preach in the afternoon. So after the morning service, everybody leaves. There's no potluck. And
Whoops.
so we are starving, because we had actually fasted that morning. When I am hungry, I get, pretty shaky and weak and stuff. And so I was praying heavily that I would have energy. And we did actually find a tomato. We sliced up a tomato and ate a tomato. So we went through the service. Andrew preached. And at the end of the service, I realized that I wasn't just not hungry. I had plenty of energy. I was full of energy. And so I said a prayer of thanks to the Lord. Thank you for giving me this energy. And what would you like me to do with it? And he said, into my mind, marry him.
Ha! Sorry, go ahead.
I said, no. That's not at all what I was waiting or thinking of. That's not what my desire was at the time either.
Yeah.
So I was like, no. But then I stopped again, and I said a prayer again, and I said, okay, Lord, if this is what your desire is for me, prepare me. And an incredibly peaceful spirit just washed over me. And it was like, okay, I can do this. And so I knew it was from the Lord. And I thought it was kind of cool that your testimony said that we were being prepared. And then my testimony, or my question really to the Lord was, I need you to prepare me. Or statement to the Lord. Yeah. And so then 6 months later, we broke up.
Naturally.
Naturally.
Yeah, we had...
after these amazing testimonies.
Yeah, it was a struggle. There's a lot of things going on in our lives that made it difficult. But our breaking up wasn't anything... There was no animosity. It was very mature. We're friends. We still stayed...
We were making each other miserable.
Yeah, we were.
Especially towards the end.
Well, and here's the thing, is the testimony is fantastic. It's wonderful to have a testimony, but our hearts weren't in the testimony. And that was really a sticking point, a huge barrier that prohibited us from being able to go forward. And so we kind of still needed time. That waiting time that the Lord told me was a little bit longer than I had ever thought possible. And I had got to a point where I thought this would never happen.
But I didn't want to follow the Lord's will. That was kind of what it came down to. I didn't have any desire to do that. So
exactly. Well, and this is what faith really is, and this is what we've talked about a lot since we've gotten married, exercising our faith on the Word of God. Faith is not something that's blind. Faith occurs once you already have been given some kind of understanding or knowledge. Now, what are you going to do with it? Are you going to follow it through? Think of Abraham. When he was given the promise of this land and a great nation, he exercised his faith because he had received this understanding and this knowledge. If he had never had that understanding or knowledge, then he wouldn't have been able to exercise faith. And the same is true of us. God gave us both a testimony that we were to be married, that was God's desire for us because he could see beyond what we could see.
Yeah.
And we were not willing to follow it through. But once we started to trust in God's testimony for us, and we started to approach it again in the end of 2020 after I had been elected pastor at Outreach. We had a time to spend together, and I asked her, do you still think about the testimony? And she said yes. And that was kind of a surprise to me. And we decided from that moment that we would start to pray and fast about our future and what God wanted for us. And I think through that, he humbled us enough that we were willing to trust in the testimony that he had given. And it wasn't all easy. It wasn't just rainbows and sunshine the whole bit.
Mm-hmm.
We had a little up and down even after we decided that this is what we wanted to do. We wanted to put our foot forward in walking toward marriage. We talked about what we wanted, what we saw, and we realized that this is what we wanted.
Yeah. We spent 3 years apart, and I was still pretty angry and bitter. Not at Andrew, and not even really at God, just more at myself, probably. But when we started fasting together, even then I was like, I don't want to do this. So even my heart was still not there initially. And there would be days I would even forget that we were supposed to fast. And, he would always message me and be like, how'd your fast go? And I was like, oh, I forgot to do it, and
Wow.
He's over it.
Obviously.
Okay, so he says we were dating. I don't we weren't dating, but we broke up, so maybe we were. We went to Hanukkah at the Sperry's one night, and I was still very resistant, just kept him at arm's length, and that night he was like, I can't keep doing this, because his heart would be broken every time that we would come together and split up and come together and, share time together. And so he was like, we can't keep doing this. Either we're going to follow what God has asked us to do, or we're not. And he is, like, clearly you're not wanting to do this. So let's just end it and not return to this. Final. Be done. And so that was what we did for a week.
It was like 2 weeks or so. It was about 2 weeks.
I was miserable. Then, not to be too dark, but I was suicidal for 3 years, and that was pretty much the end and beginning of our relationship. I don't know. It must have somehow been tied to this, because I always felt when I was with Andrew and we were together that I had the Lord's Spirit with me, and then when we were apart, it was like I was cut off from the Spirit, complete darkness, hopelessness. And so I was coming out of this great depression. And when we broke off, finally, it was like, I thought I was in darkness and wanting to commit suicide. It was worse than that. And so I was like, I can't keep doing this. I won't survive. So we came back together, and I said, all right, I need you to paint me a picture. 5 years from now, 10 years from now, what does our life look like? You need to show me so I can see it. I can't see it right now, and all I see is misery. And so you started sharing what you wanted for our life.
Yeah.
And I realized that was actually exactly what I wanted too. And so we finally said, okay, maybe we should just try this,
Yeah.
And this is what you've been saying all along.
Yeah,
let's just try it.
Thanks for listening,
So I was like, okay.
Yeah.
I say we do it.
Yeah.
And it was kind of that simple.
Well, we just went straight from that pretty much to being engaged.
Yeah.
We did the marriage counseling, which was very good.
So when people were like, I didn't even know you guys were together, it's like, yeah, we weren't.
Yeah.
We went from not being together to being engaged. So
Yeah.
I don't know.
Which doesn't always work for everybody, but this
course not.
is our testimony. Is this would never have happened. The marriage and the joy, and now we have a son. This would not have happened without God and His hand moving in our life. We've had a lot of struggles and difficulties, but we've also had tremendous joy and being filled with the Spirit and much happiness. And so I hope that something that we have shared can encourage you in your own relationship, whether you're someone who's already married, or maybe you are desiring to be married one day, or maybe you're not sure, kind of like how I was. That is really important as we go through with something like this. This is one of the most important decisions, other than making a covenant of baptism. This is probably about the most important thing you're going to do, is to seek God's will and to be willing to follow it.
It's not easy. But yeah, and obviously our marriage isn't easy either,
No.
But I feel like all of our struggles happened before we were married. And so now it's just kind of combing through the tangles that we have already come across. So
yeah, perhaps in a future video we'll share a little bit more of some of the things that we've learned in marriage. We haven't been married a whole long time, like a year and a half as of this recording, But that's part of what this series of relationships is all about, is to be able to share things that we have struggled with, so that hopefully when you come across them, you know you're not the only one, and perhaps we can provide some type of useful information or steps that you can take to help you as you're going through those different trials. So until next time, this is Andrew and Jane King, your fellow brother and sister in this journey we call life.
Proclaim the glory of the Lord. Let every tongue confess He reigns.